Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks so much for taking just a brief moment to watch this celebratory episode of Indie Thinker. I'm going to take just a moment to look back on 2022 and celebrate some of the things that this channel was able to accomplish, or at least the things I want to try to accomplish with this channel. And then I'll also give you some very important updates about a brand new season of Indie Thinker starting on January 3rd and some of the things that we're going to be jumping into. So you definitely do not want to miss that, because there's a couple of additions to the show that we're going to be adding that I think you will really, really enjoy. So you'll definitely want to stick around for that, like I said. But I want to look back on 2022 for just a moment, and I want to do that via a story that just recently happened, because I think it illustrates kind of what I really have felt 2022 was about for this show and for me, and what I was trying to, I guess, expose and uncover. And so this story comes from the Times, and it showcases the incomparable intellect over at The View, Whoopi Goldberg, and some recent statements that she just made. So I want to read those to you real quickly. So the article says this: the famous co-host of The View chatted with The Times, where her so-called cancellation was brought up, and it got Whoopi on a new mini-rant about the Jewish people and whether they're a race or not, something that got her in trouble earlier this year. Whoopi says that Jewish people themselves are divided on whether they're actually a race or not. By the way, no, they're not. Even quoting one Jewish friend as saying, "Not for nothing, there is no box on the census for the Jewish race, so that leads me to believe that we're probably not a race." The author points out what many have already said on this topic, namely that the Nazis viewed the Jews as a race, therefore, in this context, they should be discussed as such. To that, Whoopi replied, "Yes, but that's the killer, isn't it? The oppressor is telling you who you are. Why are you believing them? They're Nazis. Why believe what they're saying?" Whoopi goes on to double down on the notion that the Holocaust wasn't about race from her point of view by saying, remember who they were killing first. They were not killing racial, they were killing physical. Whatever that means, since it's not English, you can probably try to fill in the lines. They were killing people they considered to be mentally defective, and then they made this decision. When the author points out to Whoopi that physical tests were being done to Jews to determine if they were in fact Jewish in Nazi Germany, again emphasizing that Nazis viewed Jews as a race, Whoopi pushed back and said, they did that to black people too, but it doesn't change the fact that you could not tell a Jew on the street. You could find me, you couldn't find them. Now, why is it important for Whoopi to continually stick her foot in her mouth on this subject, that she wants to continually talk about it after she's already gone on a PR tour to try to apologize for what she said in the past? Well, it's very possible that, like Kyrie and like Nick Cannon, she has been listening to Black Hebrew Israelites or the Nation of Islam and people like Louis Farrakhan, and thinks that the Jewish people are not what the Jewish people actually are. I think it's fair to state that. Now, we don't hear much about that because you can't pin that on a white person. It's a racist ideology, a racist theology that is predominantly held by black people. And of course, that doesn't fit the mainstream narrative that's trying to be put forth by the media. So it is very possible that Whoopi holds some of those views. I don't know that to be true, so let's go to something perhaps that we can prove that's a little bit more substantive. I think it's at least fair to suggest that Whoopi needs skin color to really, really be important. That's why she wants to deny anybody that has white skin a race. It's important to her because it's the only interesting thing about her, or so she thinks. God made her in his image, and she's actually way more interesting than she might suggest outside of the color of her skin. But because Hollywood is so eaten up with concerns with representation, among other things, it's about the only employable attribute that she has that puts her on TV. I wish someone would come along with a dream about the conduct of your character being way more important than the color of your skin. Maybe we'll have to just keep on praying about that. More importantly, I think she might be actually keenly aware of something, which gives her some credit here. And it's something that we don't want to talk about much. If race is not merely skin color, much of what the left says about race totally falls apart. They need superficial ways to differentiate people in order to play their identity politics games. The one thing they can't do is actually talk about facts and science. They have to keep things as superficial as possible for their ideas to work. It's what James Lindsay says is replacing logos with pathos, or reason with feelings. See, underlying so much of the postmodern left of today is this relativistic stance because of the postmodern mindset. In other words, it is a denial of objective reality because modern fascism is actually deeply interested in exterminating the truth, or the Judeo-Christian tradition from Western culture. To do that, they are wholly dependent upon a group of people who believe lies and won't think for themselves. Therefore, it should not come as a surprise that Whoopi actually believes this load of horse crap, that Jewish people are not a race. She does not believe in God, and as a result has adopted her own arbitrary morality based upon her own personal preferences. See, the real fascists sit behind desks on The View and pontificate, and they'll simply erase a whole race of people because they simply want to, and they'll erase along with it every vestige of logic and reason while they're at it. So I'm actually a little bit surprised that we are so blown away when Whoopi says these patently false and ridiculous things. Why not? When you have no God and you are your own God, you can come up with whatever you want. You can arbitrarily dictate morality, and you can arbitrarily dictate truth, and you can arbitrarily dictate your identity. See, facts don't matter. So Whoopi's remarks are actually wholly consistent for the modern moral relativist. So we should stop being surprised by them. If we deny God, the logical step forward is that we must deny objective truth. Now, I want to be clear, because what I'm not saying is that religion, generally speaking, or Christianity in particular, is the only way to come to know truth. But I am saying I fail to see how we will not mistake the truth for a lie and even lie to ourselves and others about the truth when we have no official standard by which to judge reality, when there is nothing bigger than ourselves by which we can determine what objective truth really is and who gets to dictate it. In other words, maybe this is a more kind of idiomatic way of saying it, but behavior follows belief. So if you do not believe in a truth giver, then it follows that you will not believe in the truth. And then you'll act according to that idea. And this is what I've kind of been after in 2022, is exposing moral relativism and the problem that it is. I love listening to the guys over at the Daily Wire, Matt Walsh in particular, and he often says something, and it's one of the things that I disagree with him pretty wholeheartedly, which is that we do not need religious arguments to discuss so many of the things that are happening in the world today. Now, while we may say we don't need them, it depends on what you mean by need. Because at the end of the day, you're ultimately going to come back to my preference and your preference without understanding that we need religious arguments and we need God by which to truly say that there is such a thing as objective truth. So I think we have to come to the place where we start talking about the existence of God and the reality of Christianity more and more. In other words, eventually we come back to the question, by what standard do we judge truth? Science, yes. Logic, yes. But we care about those things, and we care about science and logic because of something bigger than that. So for in other words, why not bend science and logic to fit our sense of reality? Isn't that what the modern, non-conforming, non-binary sexual ideologue is doing today? They see facts, and then they just have a higher authority that tells them not to believe those facts or that they can do whatever they want to with them. See, it's an epistemic tool that helps them make sense of the data that they see. And for Christians, that person is God. Therefore, we don't change the facts to fit the narrative. We have a predisposition to let the facts speak to us because we believe that the one who created those facts is God. But if we're bigger than the facts, and our identity is bigger than the facts, then the facts really don't matter. They're just there to serve us when we need them. And this has inundated so much of what I've talked about in 2022. I've tried to bring up moral relativism as much as I can and tried to expose it for what it says and the implications of it. And I've done that through weekly current events shows, and I'd encourage you to go back and check some of them out. So this year I did about 100 shows exactly throughout the whole really first season of Indie Thinker. And I've also done that through discussions with key thought leaders. I've had people like Jennifer Knapp on the show, and with her I discussed human sexuality and Christianity, because Jennifer Knapp was a very prominent Christian musician in the early 2000s, and then later came out as gay, and then later rejected her faith. Actually did so on my show. It was the first time she'd ever specifically said that she is no longer a Christian, was on my show. Now, I have a interesting conversation with her about the nature of marriage and about the nature of humanity and about the nature of truth. And aren't you just left to your own arbitrary moral standard making without the Bible? And of course, I'll just tell you that I think the conversation is worth you checking out, because I think you'll see that I make the case very, very well that we need to have a higher standard by which we can judge what the truth really is. And then, of course, people like James Lindsay, who I already mentioned, was on the show. And my conversation with him was one of my favorite from 2022, where we talk about the cult of Marxism and cultural Marxism, and how Christianity is a solvent for what's going on in the world and what cultural Marxism is doing. So I definitely think that's something you want to check out. And then, of course, I have a conversation within the context of faith with people like Doug Beaumont, who is a Catholic apologist, and we talk about the difference between evangelicalism and Catholicism and try to kind of make some headway there, while also appreciating that there are things that both of these different groups can learn from each other. And then even outside of what you see with your two eyes on the guest shows and on our current event shows is, of course, the fact that Indie Thinker is a 501c3, so it is a nonprofit, and we are actively doing things to make a difference in our world outside of informing people and helping you create effective thinking tactics and effective arguments for what's going on in the world. But also, you should know, this past year was something really, really special in my heart. We took the funding, some of the funding that we got, and we invested it back into orphans and widows, specifically because of that text in James that says pure and undefiled religion is to take care of orphans and widows in their distresses. And so some of the funding that we get here at Indie Thinker goes back out to bless people like the Orphans and Widows Funds of the IDF, and then also not just in Israel and around the world, but also locally here in our own backyard. We adopted some widows who just recently lost their husbands for various reasons, and just made sure that they had a special Christmas, their first Christmas away from their husbands. And we did that with kind of some local ladies that were here. And we're going to be doing much, much more of that. Even at this early stage in the game, it's been important for me and for my family to make sure that Indie Thinker is not just a way to build a platform, but also a vehicle for making a difference in the lives of other people. At the end of the day, that's what I hope we've done with our current event shows and with our guest shows, is just really tried to display, if anything else, that we're interested in giving you information that can change your life, because information is power at the end of the day. And we hope that information that we provide on this show has been beneficial to you from a faith perspective and just from an intellectual perspective. And so I think that I was able to accomplish a lot in 2022, and I hope it was beneficial to you guys. And it makes me all that much more excited about 2023, because we're going to be doing some amazing things. So, for instance, I'm going to be producing the very first ever full-length documentary that Indie Thinker has ever done in 2023. And I can't give you much more information than that, other than to say it's going to be a very important and poignant documentary because of its subject matter. In fact, I've chosen a subject that I believe is a linchpin issue for leftist sexual ideology, the conversations that we're having right now based upon race, and the conversations we're having about the uptick in crime. And if you can think of an issue right now that's a problem, especially in America, This one issue, I believe, is behind all of it, and that's what this documentary is going to be about. And then also, I'm going to be producing a limited series in 2023 called Podcast to the Church, and it's going to be tackling a myriad of different issues that are important to the church in our modern setting, and try to help you navigate kind of what's going on in our world from specifically a kind of church perspective and how the church should handle these things. And on this podcast, we're going to be discussing topics like, is atheism dead? And we're going to be using the proof text of Eric Metaxas's book by the same name. But trust me, there's a lot of evidences out there. And Christianity has never stood on better ground as far as science is concerned than in the present. So you don't want to miss that. And then we'll also be covering subjects like this. Is the seeker-sensitive movement done in American churches as a result of COVID? And then we'll even tackle some Christian answers in a post-Christian world and how to give you the kind of the talking points that you need to be able to really engage people who think vastly differently than you, because that's going to become more and more common as our world becomes less and less Christian. So this new limited series, I think, is going to really be impactful. And let's just say that we've got some and at least one very, very important guest that will be joining me on a regular basis as we dig into some of these shows. So I can't wait to reveal that limited series for each and every one of you. So along with our guest shows and our current event shows, the documentary, and this new limited series that we're going to be producing that I think is so timely, I can't wait to reveal all of that to you guys. As we start a brand new year at Indie Thinker on Tuesday, January 3rd, it's going to be the best year yet. And I pray that you guys have the best year yet personally. So I hope you'll join us for it all. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And most importantly, to go with God.